Thank you all for attending this afternoon. I'm here today with Georgia voters who are going to share their stories about the problems they've had exercising their fundamental constitutional right to cast a ballot. Brian Kemp has abused his power and used the Secretary of State's office as a taxpayer-funded arm of his campaign, and recently is bullying elections officials into hurriedly certifying this election, despite all the votes not being counted. On Election Day alone, not even looking at early vote, but on Election Day alone, Georgia voters were subjected to 16-year-old machines that were having breakdowns, causing extraordinarily long lines. And due to that lack of action on those machines, we saw lines of up to 4.5 hours in precincts with large numbers of Democratic voters, voters of color, students across the state. The machine breakdowns resulted in an unprecedented number of provisional and emergency paper ballots being cast, and some folks not being able to cast a ballot at all. Secretary of State did not provide guidance to those local boards of elections, did not tell them to stock up on extra paper ballots, knowing that there was such extraordinarily high turnout. We still are waiting for members of the military and overseas Georgians for those ballots to be received. They need to be received by the end of the day today. And we know that all the votes still have yet to be counted. In fact, we have now, as I walked in here, heard from our attorney who is down in Albany that we now have a second federal judge who has said that there is an undue burden being put on voters here to exercise their right to vote. And Dougherty County has a temporary restraining order on the certification of their elections until that county can work out with that judge what they're going to do with absentee ballots there. Voters at the colleges, at the HBCUs of Morehouse, Spelman, and Clark, Atlanta, had challenges voting in particular. There are many stories, but we wanted to lift up this example in particular because these suppressive tactics are reminiscent of the Old South. Tactics that have been resurrected by Brian Kemp, who forced the state to allow him to oversee his own election and had him be the decider on who was the winner. So as Secretary of State, and as Brian Kemp was the Chief Elections Officer through the election, it is Kemp and Kemp alone who is responsible for Georgia's shocking inability to run elections effectively. And through the Democratic Party of Georgia's Voter Protection Hotline, we have been fielding thousands upon thousands of calls attempting to do the Secretary of State and local elections officials' job for them and coaching voters through how they can get their votes counted. That effort continues every hour of every day. And so this is not just a legal issue, this is an issue of fundamental fairness. The bottom line is this: the Stacey Abrams for Governor campaign is committed to making sure that every single eligible ballot cast is counted and every Georgian's voice is heard. It is essential in order for Georgians to have confidence in the legitimacy of this election and to ensure they have confidence voting in future elections. With that, I'm now going to turn it over to a Georgia voter and several Georgia voters who want to share their stories. First with Neji Adrian. Thanks, Adrian.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Neji Adrian. I'm currently an out-of-state student in Boston, though I'm registered in DeKalb County. And I'm one of the thousands of Georgians who was denied their constitutional right to vote. Despite requesting an absentee ballot and following up with DeKalb County, calling the Voter Protection Hotline, I never received an absentee ballot. And I find it disconcerting that under Brian Kemp's tenure as Secretary of State that there's so many anecdotes about Georgians not being able to vote, about it being difficult to vote. And I'm proud to stand with the Abrams team as they ensure that every voice is heard and every vote is counted, because it's important as we move through this electoral process that Georgians have faith in the process, that they believe that this is a legitimate election, so that we can believe in our elected officials in future elections. Thank you.
All right, our next speaker is going to be Cassandra Jackson.
Hi, my name is Cassandra Jackson, and I use he, him pronouns. I live in East Point, and I updated my address at least 2 times before Election Day. And on Tuesday, when I went to my polling place, they denied me a ballot. They said that I registered at a different place and that I had to go to that place, which was 30 minutes away from the polling place that I was at, my old address, in order to vote. Thankfully, I posted a post on Facebook, and a few of my friends directed me to the Democratic Party of Georgia's voter protection hotline, and they were able to help and told me that I could vote. But I know I was lucky. I had the privilege to have a car to be able to drive 30 minutes away. I also had a job that was flexible enough to allow me to take hours to be able to go take time to vote. Now, former Secretary of State Brian Kemp always said that he wanted it to make it easy to vote, but I would say that he's either lying or he's falling short of that goal seriously. Aside from me, voters, like you heard, at Morehouse, Spelman, and Clark were also turned away from their polling places and forced to go to second and sometimes third locations. And I can imagine as students, they probably didn't, like me, have access to cars and probably had classes that they had to get to. Now, Kemp may have resigned, but that doesn't erase the problems of the last few weeks, and it doesn't let him off the hook. This is a question of pure fairness. The Abrams campaign is demanding that every vote be counted before results are finalized because we don't know how many people struggled to cast a ballot. And I know it makes me feel really proud that my vote is actually going to count. The Secretary of State office has offered no proof about how many provisional ballots were cast. We only have their word to lean on. And if we learned one thing from Brian Kemp, is that his word doesn't mean much. Thank you. And I do want to introduce the next speaker. Their name is Tate Delgado.
Hello, my name is Tate Delgado. I am a lifetime resident of Gwinnett County, Georgia. Currently, I attend college at the University of Southern California, and so I knew ahead of time that I would have to take extra steps in order to be able to cast my vote. So into the county registrar's office, and I did this all ahead of time, didn't hear back for a while. Turns out that instead of sending literature to the address that I listed on my application, my college apartment, they instead sent it to my home address in Georgia. So then, of course, my family sends it out to California. I open it up thinking, okay, this has been a ridiculous process, but at least I'll get to vote in time, only to see that they have rejected my application in order to vote, despite me being a registered voter and a previous voter in the state of Georgia. Something peculiar about it was that it said that voting was a privilege, voting is a right, that shouldn't be controversial, and furthermore, because of the issues in terms of sending me this information, there was no time for me to rectify and get another application in, have them send it back. They just took too long in terms of going through these steps, and ultimately I was unable to vote in this election. I think that the blame has to clearly lie with the person who's overseeing the election. And the Abrams campaign is just demanding something very clear and fair, that every vote be, and we call on both Brian Kemp and Republicans and Democrats in positions of power in Georgia to give us the fair and democratic process that we are given as citizens of the United States. Thank you.
We're going to hear briefly from the rest of the folks who are here on a brief what their name is and their story briefly.
Hi, my name is Serbi Berrywall, and I'm a newly registered Fulton County voter. The first time I went to go vote early in Fulton County, I was incorrectly turned away from the polls because the poll worker wouldn't accept my valid out-of-state ID.
Hi, my name is Cassandra Hollis. I'm a lifetime resident of Fulton County. I'm here representing my mother, whom I took to vote on October 31st. She was told that she voted absentee in person on October 16th. That was not possible. My mom has been recovering from a respiratory illness. She definitely did not vote on the 16th. They allowed her to vote provisionally, but at last check, only what was currently in her record as having voted on the 16th is there. So her provisional vote has not been counted.
Good afternoon. My name is Arnaud Hewitt. I am the elected Fulton County surveyor, and I was deterred from voting on election day after returning to my polling location 3 times and being told that there was a 2 to 4 hour wait. That is pretty much it.
My name is Angel Poventude. I'm a Fulton County resident. I spent 13 hours at my polling place helping, volunteering, and just getting a lot of insight into the problems that we had that day. And if there's any further questions, you can ask those now.
And we now have time for some questions. So whoever would like to ask some can raise your hand.
Very much Associate Press. Just wondering, do you think that the people's opinions about the election is related to racial? Is there a racial division in how people feel about the election?
So I'm not going to talk about feelings right now. I'm going to talk about facts. The facts are that in large Democratic precincts, there were inadequate machines and inadequate paper ballots. The facts are that disproportionately impacts voters of color. It disproportionately impacts student voters. Those are the facts. What additional questions?
For people who don't understand kind of what voter suppression can look like, in terms, you talked about kind of this being reminiscent of the Old South, but I think that people think about voter suppression kind of in those older terms. They think about lynchings, they think about violence, but you all are certainly contending that this is also a form of voter suppression. So for people who don't necessarily make that connection, can you explain why the stories of folks like these do equate to voter suppression?
So stepping back from the tremendous number of issues on Elections Day, and that the voters who stand behind me are representative of tens of thousands of voters. We look at Brian Kemp's tenure over the course of his time as Secretary of State. He has purged an unprecedented number of voters, disproportionately impacting voters of color and young people. He has insisted on legislation like the exact match. He has not replaced aging machines. He has not given guidance to counties. He has tried to claim that he has won this election without even certifying all the votes at the county level. And when you look at the way this impacts Georgians, how it impacts members of the military who have not yet had their chance to be heard, how it impacts homebound Georgians when he comes out and says, like you heard today, that absentee voting is a privilege and not a right. Tell that to someone who is homebound, who is elderly, who is sick. The trampling of constitutional rights, we have now had a second federal judge saying that there's an undue burden. The first one was Judge Totenberg about a month before the election, saying that our system trampled on the constitutional rights, but she was in a situation so close to the election, that was a difficult decision she made. And just this morning in Dougherty County, we hear the same. Voter suppression looks a lot of different ways. It looks like database errors, it looks like negligence of duty, it looks like the scene at Morehouse and the AUC on Tuesday, which was utter chaos and could have been predicted. And the Secretary of State should have given guidance to Fulton County on how to be prepared when we were seeing historic turnout of young people during early vote. Inaction has been suppressive in this case. And we have time and time again that we see that. So our mission is simple: count all the votes. In the 24 hours since I saw you last here, 1,000 more early votes came in Coffee County, a county that was reporting 1,000 or 100% reported. Those were largely Republican votes. But the point remains, count all the votes. We want them all counted so that Georgians feel as though this is a fair process. It's very straightforward.
You say the voters behind you are representative of the tens of thousands of voters who are in a similar situation. Are you saying you've heard from tens of thousands of voters on the hotline, or how many voters would you estimate you've heard from so far?
Thousands. We have heard from thousands of voters who have questions about their absentee ballots, their provisional ballots. They have questions about the process and why they are turned away. And we can get you the exact numbers of folks in our follow-up.
Post online about someone who mailed in an absentee ballot and got a return saying the address was wrong. Apologies to somebody already has stuff. Is that something you guys are seeing?
So just to back up, we filed litigation, are in court today in Dougherty County. We put a holdout to every single county yesterday, a document preservation hold to all 159 county attorneys so that no evidence can be destroyed. No text message, no scrap of paper. So that has gone out for all 159 counties. We expect to file additional litigation today around absentee ballot issues, and we'll have more information forthcoming.
How likely do you think that you will have a resolution that's something that's successful?
However long it takes for all the votes to get counted. We're not on any particular timetable.
Do you have any sense of how many people you helped to actually show up with IDs or the provisionals to get those validated? Can you give us some details on that?
So the lion's share of the provisional ballots that were cast due to the failure to have adequate machinery in polling locations. That means these were not provisionals due to a lack of proper identification. That means the counties have until they certify to count these votes. There's no action needed on behalf of a voter to fix an ID issue. This week we have helped, I believe it's dozens or potentially hundreds, we'll get the exact number for you, who have coached them through going to their boards on any ID issue. But the lion's share, the vast majority of paper ballots and provisional ballots should be counted with no action on behalf of the voter. And that is what's precipitated a lot of the incoming calls because of the confusion on that issue. Because some counties were calling them emergency paper ballots, some counties were calling them provisional. Bottom line, count all the votes, and we're working with every single county to possibly understand how many are out there. And we continue to learn about new ballots that need to be counted.
Go ahead.
Yes, so the counties have to certify their elections by Tuesday, right? Every county in the state?
By statute, it's the Monday after the election.
Right, but they got it to Tuesday at 5 p.m., I think now.
There are some counties doing Monday and some doing Tuesday, and there's 15 counties that have certified this week already.
Right, so do you expect all of these voting issues to be resolved by then?
I expect the counting of all these ballots will continue, and our pursuit of ensuring that every vote is counted will continue as long as it needs to be. And all options are on the table for additional litigation to ensure that that is the case.
Well, just as a follow-up to that, I mean, do you know how many counties could be affected by the Wednesday holiday on Monday? I mean,
It's a great question for our new Secretary of State to find out the list of who is certifying on Monday, the federal holiday, and who is certifying Tuesday. We have what we've heard from the counties, but again, that's public information that would be best requested by the sitting Secretary of State.
We have time for 2 more questions, Faith.
We haven't seen Stacey Abrams since the election night. I don't know about the other journalists, but I know I haven't seen her in public. Is she expected to step up and speak to the voters about these issues you're raising here at the campaign headquarters?
Stay tuned. Yep.
Last question, go ahead.
Yes, I will confirm this about many people like civil retirees and other people trying to bring power cords, trying to help out, being turned away, kicked out. Could you confirm some of these reports?
Yeah, there are a lot of different media reports on Election Day and throughout early vote of just chaos and very basic things not happening. lack of power cords. We have, over the course of early vote in Southwest Atlanta, there was a sewage overflow in an early vote location, people showing up, not being directed. There's an untold number of voters who didn't have the time to take off of work, were confused and turned away. We'll never know that number. We'll never know how many voters, due to complete voter suppression or negligence or incompetence or lack of preparedness, weren't able to cast that ballot. We have records, thousands upon thousands of folks who've reported issues like that to us that we're looking into as we look at all options on the table. The amount of irregularities in this election are incalculable, including, the weekend before the election, we learned that there's a breach on the Secretary of State's website and access to data. Soup to nuts, there are major problems here, and that we're doing our best to get to the bottom of. And as it makes sense, we are filing litigation that we think we can win to force the issue to get every vote counted so that the voters of Georgia can have confidence that their vote that they cast was counted, and that they can have confidence moving forward that voting matters. Because right now that's a very big, legitimate question in the state of Georgia.
Just a follow-up to my question, why haven't we heard from the candidate herself yet?
You will absolutely hear from the candidates soon.